Hello and welcome to another film kind of review that we do, where we this time talking about The Elephant Man from 1980, directed, of course, by David Lynch. And joining me is the beautiful Jen. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Frank. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Yeah. So this is quite a lot we've got to get through here on this one, I think. It's a wonderful film. And just to give you a little bit of a background, but we can go back to it as we go along, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of a setup that led to the film being made. It came from a journal, I suppose, originally by Frederick Treves, who, of course, is the real-life doctor that looked after John Merrick. And it was called The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences. I can't even say that. Reminiscences, yes. You know the one, Jen, don't you? Yeah.
Reminiscences.
That's the one, yes. Thank you. And later on, it became a stage play, which was written by a man called Bernard Pomerance. And it premiered at the Hampstead Theatre in London in 1977. And later went to off-Broadway and then on Broadway, and from about 1979 to 81. And the original lead as the Elephant Man was David Schofield, an actor called Schofield. I don't know, was that the family of Schofield actors? I imagine.
Don't know.
There's a few Schofields that were famous actors. I think he may have been the father or grandfather. I don't know. But other notable performances were by David Bowie, Mark Hamill, and Bruce Davison. So there you are. And there was one proviso on the stage plays that no makeup or prosthetics was used. So they literally were just themselves emoting.
How interesting.
They didn't have any makeup on whatsoever. So there we are. I actually saw a clip, funny enough, there's a rare clip of Bowie playing Merrick, and he's in a bathtub talking to someone, maybe it's the doctor or something, and he's just emoting like someone who may have he was contorting his body and his speech, just himself, talking the side of the mouth, doing his hands sort of going everywhere, and that it was really quite striking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it became very successful on the stage circuit. Then later on, it got a revival again in 2002, and then 2014. I don't know who played the parts then, but it came back a few times. On the back of that stage play version, I think Brooks Films wanted to do something different, and because they'd been known, predominantly for comedy and things like that, So he wanted to branch out, and what happened was, they went through a few people that they thought they want to direct it, and then one of his assistants or something mentioned this director David Lynch, and he said, "Oh well, I've never heard of him. Has he got anything out?" He said, "Well, as a matter of fact, they're doing a midnight showing down at this theatre in LA of Eraserhead." Right? He said, "Eraserhead, what's that?" So why don't you come down and have a look? So he went down and he watched the whole of Eraserhead. Right?
Was Eraserhead his only feature at that time?
That was his only feature at that time, yeah. So he didn't have a plethora of work to show someone. It was literally, that was it, and a few shorts that he did, experimental films. But that was the first full-length film. So he said, "Oh, yeah, it happens to be showing down, in this little theatre." So along goes Mel Brooks and looks at it, and he said, I'm not sure if Lynch was with him or not at that, or that was a later meeting or something. But anyway, they got together, and Lynch went to his office or something, and one of the guys rang Lynch and said, "Oh, Mel's just watched it. He's looking for someone to direct this film," and he said, "We've got him to watch Eraserhead," and he said Lynch was quoted as saying, "Well, it's been nice knowing you." Thinking that he's got no chance whatsoever.
That's so humble.
Yeah. So anyway, eventually Mel met him, and he jumped up and embraced Lynch and said, "I love you. You're a madman. You're in."
Great.
And that was it. And the way that's where we are. That basically is like the real fast version of the events leading up to him getting the part in the directing it. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I guess not many people would know that Mel Brooks was behind
Yeah.
The Elephant Man.
I didn't. I mean, I didn't know that not when I was younger. I had no idea. I didn't put two and two together at all. You know, that he's the same man that did, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein and all that, you know. Other films of note by Brooks films is History of the World Part 1, Cronenberg's The Fly, which I had no idea he did, Spaceballs, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights.
Yeah. So Spaceballs and Robin Hood, Men in Tights are the kind of things that we naturally associate with Mel Brooks. But I mean, I have a feeling it was you that told me this years ago. Was it? Did he keep his name off some of the more serious subject matter films?
He did, I think. Yeah.
So as not to give the impression of something was comedic.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he may have used a pseudonym or something. I don't know. So, Jen, let me turn it over to you now. Anything you want to bring up at this point? Right, we're just into the film now. It's being made. Yeah, there is one thing you wanted to touch upon: the makeup in it, because that was Lynch was going to have a go at doing that himself, by the way. And when he was in London for the pre-production period, the prepping of it, he tried to make a head sculpt of John Merrick and failed miserably. He did something similar in Eraserhead, you know, the little baby thing. And he was trying to do something a little bit like that, but it just didn't work. And he gave up hope and, creating it. Then Chris Tucker came along, who did the makeup and became an award-winning makeup artist. But there's a connection there, isn't there, that you want to bring up, Jen?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say about the makeup, the prosthetic makeup, and the way that the character's physicality is shown in the film is my first encounter with that wasn't actually through the film. It was when I was at school in our biology lab. We had a photograph on the wall of the skeleton, Joseph Merrick's skeleton. And I remember just being completely compelled by this image and trying to visualize what the exterior of that human being might look like with the skeleton being as it was. So when I saw the film, there was an element of I guess some pieces falling into place and being able to see it brought to life in that way. So the Chris Tucker, who did the design, this incredibly detailed design, he then later went on to do the disfigurement makeup for the Phantom in the Phantom of the Opera for Michael Crawford's first, when Michael Crawford first had the role. And as you know, Frank, I am a massive fan of the Phantom of the Opera. Yeah. So so that connection is really interesting, and sort of seeing how I'm not going to say influenced the Phantom makeup is by the Elephant Man prosthetic, but as we were talking about just before we started recording, there is an element of familiarity in the Phantom makeup that we can sort of recognize from some elements of the Elephant Man.
There was, yeah.
So yes, Chris Tucker.
There you go. That's amazing, isn't it? How things follow through like that. Yeah.
And the other thing about the makeup, of course, is when the Elephant Man was nominated for a whole tranche of Academy Awards, one thing it wasn't nominated for was makeup design. And the reason it wasn't nominated for makeup design is no such award existed. So after that, I think there was some discontent about the fact that maybe it should have been recognized in the award circuits in that way. And then an award was later developed so that makeup and makeup design could be recognised in rewards going forward. So awards going forward. So that's another nice little tidbit, I think.
It is, yeah, it's amazing. Because I'm sure I would have, had it been an award back then, I would be shocked if it didn't get it. Makeup alone.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
I mean, that is really something else. I've never seen anything, not sort of back then, you didn't see anything so intricate like that. And so close to what he did look like. I don't know if you've seen original pictures of him.
No, I haven't.
Quite extraordinary how detailed it was.
Yeah.
How close to the actual thing it was. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Now we've got, think about the actors that are in this. Wow, it's like a to Z of like British actor talent, isn't it?
Well, you know how I feel about John Hurt.
Yeah.
Legend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And such an extraordinary performance from him, only really having his left hand and his eyes on display.
That's it.
So the rest of his performance comes through physicality and through the voice and through audible emotion and physical movement emotion. But the way he uses that hand, the way he uses his eyes, done with such skill and such power, to great effect.
It was. And there's a connection there as well, Jen, which is one of our favourite ones, you and I, with John Hurt as well, who also was in this other film. And the cinematographer of this film was Freddie Francis.
Freddie Francis.
Who later went on to work with Lynch on Dune and The Straight Story as well. I think maybe something else in between, but it's certainly those. So again, quite a long relationship with Lynch off the back of this particular film. And he's an amazing cinematographer on this. It's stunning. But let's not forget a little forgotten gem that he also directed back in the 70s.
Oh, yes.
Called The Ghoul.
The Ghoul, yes, The Ghoul.
The Amicus Films, I think it was, or something like the smaller version of Hammer.
Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, what a gem that was.
And and of course, John Hurt was in it, playing this nutty farmer or something, wherever he was.
Was it a groundskeeper or something?
Yeah,
that was great. I would absolutely recommend to anyone listening to this podcast to go out and find a copy of The Ghoul immediately.
That's it.
And watch it and just appreciate its idiosyncrasies and its it's just a gem, as you say. It's just a gem.
Yeah. So yeah, no, a good recommendation for both of us there. That's a hidden classic there, The Ghoul, directed by Freddie Francis.
Yes.
Yeah, it was directed by him, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
So he didn't just do cinematography; he did actually direct a few films back in the 60s and 70s, more so, I think. So yeah, so that's rather cool. I think Peter Cushing's in it as well, which is always he's always a regular horror actor, very solid actor as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those films that makes absolutely no apologies for being what it is. It's just gloriously proud of its own ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And just a joy to watch.
Yeah. Also in this, of course, we got Anne Bancroft. And Anne Bancroft was married to Mel Brooks.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't know that.
So that's how she got into it, I guess. Possibly, probably didn't have to do any auditions, who plays the actress in this. And that was based on the real character original as well. Mm-hmm. He did actually go to the theatre to see a performance and met this actress. So that there's certain other things that are not true. Artistic license, in films, obviously. We've also got...
That's an incredible moment, if you don't mind just pausing on that.
Oh, it is.
That theatre scene, because for all of the ugliness that's in the story, whether it's what we perceive as physical ugliness or just the ugliness within the human soul, there is also that moment of extraordinary beauty, which is the beauty of the theatre and the beautiful of creativity and performance and imagination. And that scene in the theatre, it just perfectly captures the wonder that so many of us get when we go to the theatre. And it's just one of the most, it's the bit that always makes me tear up, probably even more so than the scenes which might be designed to make an audience member tear up. It's just that scene where he is sitting in that box looking down upon the performance and just being completely enraptured in what he's seeing, and the world. And it's that moment that says the world is beautiful and people are beautiful, as well as all of this horror that we've seen up until that point in the story.
Yeah, that really was gorgeous set. And also I like the standing ovation he got at the end and the applause. And how humble he is, all the way through. So humble, Other performances got John Gielgud, of course, isn't it? Wendy Hiller, who's brilliant as the sort of the matriarch kind of nurse character. Mother's Head, I believe her name was, Miss Mother's Head.
That's one of my favourite moments in the film, is when the hospital worker says, "Only Mother's Head can fire me now," and she whacks him on the head with a box. It's done.
Yeah.
That was a brilliant piece of
it was good,
acting.
And of course we got Freddie Jones as Bites, kind of like the meanie in it, who's controlling poor John and flogging him, and the terrible brutality involved in it. My prize, my treasure, he says, you can't take him away from me, he's making me money.
Yeah, and that speaks to the dehumanization of the character, and this human soul, this person treated as an object, treated as a currency, referred to as an it or a creature, throughout. And that's one of the uglinesses of society that I think we're being challenged to give some thought to. How we profit off one another. There's a lot of it in there. There's a lot of the indifference of things, isn't it? Like, we see things that we don't understand and therefore we attack or segregate or whatever. That's a common thing. It still goes on now. It's not, we haven't moved on a great deal, to be honest with you, in many ways. We see it so much in some of these, these stories which give us a disfigured protagonist, things like The Elephant Man or Phantom or The Hunchback of Notre Dame. These wonderful stories which seek ultimately to hold a mirror up to society and say, I probably shouldn't swear on your podcast, but you're holding a mirror up and saying, look at your behaviour, or look at the behaviour of the mob, look at the behaviour of the masses. Can you see yourself in this? And maybe inviting us to reflect upon that. But I think with The Elephant Man as well, because there is such extremity to the disfigurements as well, it creates a sense of distance in terms of what we can relate to. And with the characters who are the voyeurs in this story, all the way through to those that will heckle at a fairground attraction, all the way through to the high society people who applaud him in the theatre and show their acceptance. On the great scale of them, where does each of us sit in terms of how we might, what gaze we might cast upon this individual. The film asks some hard questions, makes us ask some hard questions of ourselves. I think particularly because with The Elephant Man, his character is so mild, his character is so vulnerable and innocent, and there's not a moment of cruelty in him at all that he would show upon anybody else, despite the horrors that that character has seen. When I compare it with something like Phantom, which actually doesn't really put too much focus on the physical deformity, it's more about his behavior and the choices that he makes, which sort of invites judgment.
Yeah.
So it's for me, it's very much a story about voyeurism, and what is monstrosity? Is it in something that maybe looks unusual, or is it in our behavior? And who is exempt from that behavior? Because we can look at Bites whipping him and flogging him and putting him on display, and we say, yeah, that guy's the villain. But then we can also look at Frederick Treves, who is the hero, who's the savior. He rescued him from that, but also puts him on display and also exposes him to scrutiny, right from putting him in the anatomical lecture, showing him off in a way that is humiliating, in a way that even Bites didn't make him pull his pants down. It's so, yeah. I don't know if am I making sense?
You are
waffling on a little bit, but I think no one in this story is innocent of subjecting this man to cruelty in their gaze.
Yeah. Yes.
And you mentioned Anne Bancroft, actually, and I think her character has the most beautiful moment of that.
Oh yeah.
Where she comes in, she meets him for the first time, and she instantly has this gorgeous smile, this open, warm smile, this gesture of acceptance. And he turns away from her momentarily, I think, to put the photo on the table, and her face just drops a tiny bit as she registers her shock.
Yes.
And she plays that so beautifully. But instantly finds her smile again as he turns back to her. But it's just, I think that's one of the most beautiful moments in the film, is when
that was very touching, that when they were reading passages of Romeo and Juliet and things like that.
Yeah,
that was lovely. It was nice that there was little moments of like normality, I suppose, and escape for him amongst all that cruelty around him. He did have a couple of moments, like that part, watching the theatre performance, how he'd been treated by Treves in his little room there, and he was building his church, a cathedral mock-up from what you can see from the window, and
what talent!
Amazing talent.
I mean, my understanding, and I might be wrong, but my understanding is that's based on fact. The fact that Joseph Merrick did create this model of a cathedral that he inspired predominantly by imagination, but that he did so with this intricate work with just one functioning hand.
Yes.
And based on imagination. So what an incredible internal eye he had, and what incredible dexterity to be able to create something so beautiful and so detailed and tiny with only one functioning hand.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
It really was. And that was true. Yeah, he did actually do that, build that. I just find that amazing. Very gifted and learned, he was reading a lot. He was writing, he didn't get to do a lot because it was, I guess, his time sadly was limited when he moved to the London hospital. In his life, his life expectancy wasn't long. But he did write a little journal as well. I don't know if it's ever been printed. I imagine it's been printed, but he did write little, like, day-to-day sort of thoughts and feelings, things, Be interesting to read that, to get into his mind, what he was thinking and feeling then, The music, I think we mentioned this before, was by John Morris, who I hadn't heard of, at that point. I think we touched upon this on the Mulholland Drive thing. And of course, we mentioned Freddie Francis.
Yeah, so the music.
Watch the Ghoul. Yeah.
Watch the Ghoul, everyone. The music is really, really important part of the overall impression of this film. Obviously you've got the sort of the fairground feel theme.
Yeah, I like that.
And the kind of whimsy and the dissonance, the kind of uneasy feeling that gives us, whilst it's got the kind of the whimsy of fairground music. But of course, a piece of music that was used really famously in this was the Barber Adagio for strings.
Oh yes,
which I think maybe creates also as impactful a musical moment as any of the original score.
Oh yes, that really got me. That did. The way where that was placed in the film, that really got me.
Yeah.
Nothing ever dies or nothing ever ends, she says, doesn't. Oh dear.
Yeah.
That really got me bad. That when he was rolling, lying down to die.
Yeah, but the way the music kind of fits in with that as well, it just takes you on that journey, and so that emotion, it's such an emotional piece of music, but done so subtly and executed with such precision. Just an extraordinary cinematic moment, I think, that will always be remembered, and that film will always be remembered this film will always be remembered for that moment.
I think
the
so.
Adagio for strings and the death scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting that when I saw a clip of it was about 20 odd years back, Lynch talking about his films, and they showed he was sitting there and they showed clips from a couple of little scenes from each film he did, and it went on The Elephant Man, and the guy was asking him, he doesn't like describing things, but the guy was really, really pressing him to give some idea of what he meant by this, that, and the other. And the bit where the birth of the Elephant Man happens, when the mother's attacked by the elephant and so on, which I don't think was true, actually. I don't think that did happen like that. But and then the smoke fills the screen. You hear the baby crying, and he said, why the smoke? What did the smoke mean? And he said, well, the smoke was like a frozen smoke. I had this idea of this frozen smoke, and it erupted. And he said it reminded me of the condition that John had, where these tumors erupted from the inside out, and all this. And he said that's kind of like how I saw him being born. So that was his feeling on it. Yeah,
that's extraordinary.
That's how he kind of did it in a surrealist sense,
Yeah, and it creates that surreal, that kind of dream feel, whether or not the events that it kind of depicts are true or not. I think they're probably the impression that comes through is that it's the elephant connection is actually a story invented to introduce the character to audiences, in the fairground, to give some sort of mythology, if you will, to his condition, but the feeling that goes with it, the sound design that goes with it as well, sort of the choking, repetitive machinery of the Victorian era, and how that blends with the thudding of the elephants walking. It feels dreamlike, and it feels frightening. It feels nightmarish. You see the mother screaming, and her mouth is open and contorted, and it's this dark. It's just horrible to watch. So yeah, it kind of sets that kind of it sets the tone for the rest of the film. That opening sequence, which is one of nightmare.
Like that nightmare imagery, which sound really evokes, really sort of heightens that anxiety as well. The industrial sounds and all that stuff going on.
Yeah.
And that sound design was there were obviously quite a few people involved in sound on that, but the sound design and special sounds were David Lynch and Alan Splett, and Alan Splett worked on the soundscapes on the Razorhead as well.
Oh,
because there's a lot of industrial sounds in that, if you ever remember it. There's factory sounds and things going on in the background. You can hear like things being struck, metal being struck, something that sounds like things are being constructed in the background and all that. So it's all there. And he also worked on Blue Velvet as well.
Should we talk about machinery and the sort of industrial revolution that's happening in the backdrop of this this story, because one of the early scenes, if I remember correctly, is Treves and his team operating on someone who's had an accident with a machine. And there is an ongoing motif of machinery and the industry that is evoked with that. And there's a bit at the beginning that we talked about in the smoke. We see it in the street scenes with Victorian London, but then there's a dream sequence in the middle as well, I think, where we spend quite a bit of time looking at the innards of a machine. Do you have any thoughts about that and what that is, what that's communicating to us as an audience?
Interesting, because when Treves is up and the team of operating on that man who's had the accident, and they've got that rope tight on his pulling it to it's grim.
It's grim. I can't quite see.
Thank God we've moved on a bit from that. The last couple of years or so.
Thank goodness for anaesthetic.
Have you tightened that rope a bit more on his leg, so he doesn't start jumping around and in pain? I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But he does say something that's quite telling, though. Treves, he says, we're getting a lot more of these machine accidents now. These damn machines. It's almost like can't quite stand progress. Like we're moving into a different world in a way with machinery and things like that, rather than it's making things slightly easier, but also they have the downside of being dangerous. People are kind of in fear of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he's a little bit against the whole thing, but at the same time, with medicine, for instance, machines are going to play a huge part in it later on, because technology it moves on so much in a short space of time when you think about it. From doing it like very barbaric like that to where we are now with like precision laser cutters and things like that. So maybe I don't know if it's sort of, maybe it's showing like sometimes progress is not something people welcome. I don't know.
And how does that parallel with the actual story being told? Because this is not a story about machines. It's not the Terminator. No. The machines will rise or anything like that. No, it's this is a story about how perception of an individual needs to change. Or how we treat people. So where's the parallel between the ongoing comments on machinery and industry? And you said something interesting there about some people are against it, but actually coming around, if you come around to the idea. So I'm curious as to how that fits. I don't necessarily have a view myself, or I have a view, but I don't know the answer. But it strikes me as something that feels very intentional. It strikes me as something that is trying to communicate something, and that it does have a parallel with the story that's being told. So I'm just curious as to what that might be.
I wish I knew, Jen.
Me too.
I sort of went through all the other preliminaries of it, the other side of it, just talking about the machines, but not really looking much deeper into that.
So I think for me it's
something to do with like fighting progress, fighting I don't change, maybe.
Or maybe just that we are on the cusp of change. This was an era on the cusp of change, and the change in industry is one thing, but also what's changing or what's being driven in this particular story is the change of perception. And actually we see that, just thinking it through now, we see that in the audiences at the fair. So initially Merrick is a curiosity, he's put on show, people pay to see him. And we don't see any evidence of showmanship on his part. I think Bites has a sort of a introductory monologue that he does, but we don't see Merrick making a spectacle of himself. He's shown very much as being, just standing still and being gawked at. But then later we see him being displayed again in the same way, but we see the audiences are much less impressed, possibly because they can see that he's suffering, they can see that he's unwell, and he he collapses. But even when he's turning, he's on his feet, you can see he's wobbly, you can see he's not okay. And the audiences are just not really having it. They're not showing the horror. They're not enjoying the entertainment of it. They're unimpressed. And then they're even more unimpressed when they see that he's suffering. And so, you know, maybe it's something about changing attitudes, and the fact that we can change attitudes. We are in a position to influence attitudes, and the masses and the mob can be negative, like in the train station scene where he gets chased by a mob, an angry mob that starts with a child. You know, more people get in on the action because they can see, oh, that's interesting, what's happening over there. Let's all, you know, get angry and chase this person. Or it can happen the other way, like at the theatre, where you've got an auditorium full of audience members applauding him because someone in a leadership position has instigated it. So, you know, the mob can be influenced, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there is power to change perception, just as there is power to create industry and new machines and things like that.
Yeah.
That's just me making stuff up now. So
It's good. It's good. Yeah, it is an interesting point though about the machinery thing. I must admit that's something I didn't really think about till you brought it up, actually. So yeah, the sound design was awesome as much as the cinematography. They both work so well in this, creating the atmosphere right through, particularly the streets of, you know, the streets and the sounds, and it almost makes you think that you were back in Victorian London walking around. You know, it kind of, you get a feeling what it might be like actually walking.
Aided by the cinematography and the black and white.
Yeah,
so the fact that it's in black and white. And I think, and again, that kind of touches back on the voyeurism element, like whose gaze are we looking at it through? Because when you look at something that's shot in black and white and it is set in Victorian London, but it's been filmed, you know, the film's been made in the era of colour, you know, in a modern era, it's inviting us into history in a way, and it's evoking a Victorianism or a historical era that we associate with black and white. Obviously, you know, color existed in the time, but because we as the audience weren't living in that time, or the majority of us weren't, the black and white, it takes us back into history, and creates a feel that we associate with being historical, because we're used to viewing that era through a black and white lens.
That's right. So it beautifully evokes that. It really does.
But it takes away the immediacy. It takes away that kind of actually creating the world around us. It creates distance between us as an audience and the story that it's showing by putting that black and white veil through. It's reminding us that we are spectators, we're onlookers, we're not in the story, which again is very, very interesting, and it asks those questions around whose gaze are we watching this through. Yeah.
Another thing I thought about, just on the back of, just sort of come to me now, well, I've got it here, but I just wanted to bring it up, was the moment where, I think it's kind of telling, the moment where Frederick is talking to his wife, played by Hannah Gordon, and he actually says to her, you know, after, because he's brought John over to the house to meet the family, and he's also having tea with these people that come in, and you know, he's sort of walking around reveling in it in a way, but at the same time, it's, as you said, it's another way of him being exploited, and just being gawped at, you know. And there's one very telling line that Freddie says to his wife. He says, "Am I a good man?
Or you know, am I a bad man?"
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that the crux of the whole story?
Yeah.
If we were to summarize the film The Elephant Man in one line, what's it challenging us to ask? What's the active question? Am I a good man or am I a bad man? And isn't it both? Isn't the answer both?
Yeah. It's both. Yeah. Am I any better than Bites and all the rest of the people? Even though I'm not inflicting pain on him, but I am displaying him for people to go up and to say things behind in his back and stuff. Does that make me any better or worse?
Because he's doing it in a scientific guise, as opposed to fairground. So there's this kind of a societal element in that. What's socially acceptable? What is socially acceptable to be judged?
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, obviously he's not harming him, and that's a key difference, a key distinction that's important to recognize. But it absolutely does raise the question: do any of us have any business qualifying ourselves as good people or bad people? Aren't we all elements of both? If we saw Joseph Merrick standing in the street, would we not do a double take? Would we not have a moment of, there would be an element of, oh my goodness, that poor person, but there would also be an element of shock at the physical appearance.
Sure.
And I don't think any of us would be exempt from that.
Yeah.
But I guess it is what we then do with it, what we then do, and how we act, and how we act as a follow-up to that, and how we moderate our own responses. They're difficult questions.
They are, of course they are, because we're only human at the end of the day, and we are conflicted with emotions, aren't we? Mm-hmm. And we are critical. Mm-hmm. Whether we like it or not, we are, even if we're not verbal about it, we are critical about everything, really. Yeah. Some more mean than others, but or more verbal about it. But everything enters our minds. All different things enter our minds. We look at someone from afar, and we'd be critical in some sense. Because we can't control our thoughts. Like that. It's just, it's
And there's the empathy element of as well, because there is there's the outward shock, but then there's also the fear of affliction, and the that moment of gratitude of thank goodness that's not me, thank goodness that's somebody else that's having to suffer that. But yeah, it's a really uncomfortable place to consider and to ask those questions. And it's how do we behave? It's you can see in Elephant Man there are some people who choose to profit.
Yes.
From that. They see a business opportunity, and some people whose instinct is to swoop in and be a caregiver, and help. And that's where the distinctions lay.
Yeah,
I think. But yeah,
it's a tough one. It's a tough watch in many ways, actually. All around, really. I certainly go for the emotional ringer when I watch it, or most people. It's pretty hard, but there's a lot of beauty in there as well.
Isn't there just?
Yeah.
Isn't there just? What a beautiful character. So as much as the film poses questions about monstrosity, am I a good man? Am I a bad man? Am I a monster? Am I a savior? Or, the people looking upon the disfigurement and viewing it as monstrous, they call him a monster, they call him a creature, they call him it. Yeah. All these dehumanizing terms. But equally, it asks questions of beauty. What is beauty? Is beauty on the surface? Merrick views Mrs. Kendall as as being so beautiful, and his mother as being so beautiful, and he describes Treves' wife as being beautiful. so there's, there's an assessment on physical beauty, but then what really comes through the film is inner beauty, is the beauty of the human soul, the human spirit, and the generosity that comes through in someone who's been very, very mistreated, and yet still brings love and still treats people around him with love. And that's the thing that really creates a lasting impression.
Yes. I've gone through all my little points here, Ken. Is there anything you want to raise before we finish? Any other things?
There's some really visually beautiful work in the film. Is it worth talking about some of the shots, some of the images? Yeah. So the one that always sticks out in my memory is when Treves is looking through a window and he wipes away the grime and he peers through, and then he turns and he walks away, and he is a sort of a silhouette haloed by the circle of grime in the window.
I like that.
Wearing a hat. It's just a beautiful, beautiful image, and
the way he sort of disappears into
So that's an image that sprung to mind. Do you have any images that you love in that film?
I did like the sort of dream sequence, if you can call it that, but at the end when John dies, and then we go into we go up into the stars and stuff, and you see the image of the mother in like a glow effect around, and you hear a voiceover over it. I just thought that those sequences were really dreamy, but also really emotional. Obviously with that music as well, as we mentioned, Adagio for strings. So the whole marriage of the music and that together is really incredible, I think.
Yeah. So do you think that this is a film that can change you as an audience member?
I think it could. I think it has the power to do that. It depends whether you can open your heart to that, though,
because the Ghoul, we talked about the Ghoul earlier, as much as it is a joyful film, it might not change you.
No.
You go and you see it, you're entertained for an hour and a half, and you think, why was he green? And then which is always my question at the end.
Amongst other questions,
why is he green?
1001 questions. What is this film about?
But I'm the same person when I leave. I leave that film, I'm still the same person. Whereas, is that the case with The Elephant Man? Does it not ask us questions that prompt us to reflect on ourselves?
Oh, sure, it does. But I think that's more on a personal level. I don't think it's going to change the world, sadly.
No.
We've got a long way to go for anything to do that. Otherwise there wouldn't be any wars, and there wouldn't be this, that, and the other if it was that easy. But I think it should pose a lot of questions. It should make people be a little more compassionate, a little bit more open-minded and hearted and stuff like that. The way we view people and the way we view things, not be so overcritical of others and things like that. Be more accepting, I guess, and stuff like that. But I imagine it's achieved it in pockets all around the world. It's just we don't hear those things. But we don't really hear the impact of a movie, do we, or how it really affects the world. But I'd like to think that for some people it has in its own way, a little way.
I think if a film like that can make one person ask themselves, okay, there's a spectrum of cruelty here, right from the people who, from explicit cruelty, whether beating and exploiting, all the way through to maybe something a little bit more hidden and a bit more invisible cruelty. If you can ask yourself, where am I on that spectrum, and what can I do to maybe move myself towards the more positive end, then that's a massive achievement in a piece of creative work. If just one person has that response, it has the power to reach millions. Maybe that's me being idealistic.
Well, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But you know, because it's such a human story. It's just, you know, that's the thing. That could happen to anyone. I mean, it's not just it deals with a person who's got monstrous deformities. You know, he's been very unfortunate, but it could be about. It really could branch out into anything, really. Anyone that's just been oppressed. You know, you could really go anywhere with that narrative, couldn't you? And just the wrongness of how one human can be to another, really, and just some people can just be so cruel. You know, it's just down to that, really, isn't it? When you think about it.
Yeah. So that makes me wonder then what is achieved if we took the same storyline with a less extreme disfigurement, maybe something that is just, you know, not really disfigurement, but something that is maybe less encouraged by society. And we took away the distance created by black and white, and something that feels a lot more relatable and puts us as the audience into the picture as well. Would it be a different story? Would it still have the same effect, do you think?
Maybe not. I don't know. If you did a movie now, I don't mean a remake of that film, but something that might follow a similar problem for someone, I don't see why it couldn't be impactful now in this day and age. It depends if it's just done well or not, really, isn't it? You know,
I think the point I'm making is I wouldn't be at all surprised if a lot of the decision making around how we're going to present this film was made with the objective in mind to create those questions.
Yeah.
In the minds of audiences. In one of the dream sequences, there's a bit where someone, I forget who, holds up a mirror.
Oh yes, yeah.
And there is a moment where we cannot see a reflection, and we don't know who's going to be in that mirror. Is it going to be us? Is it going to be Treves? Is it going to be John Merrick? And it is John Merrick, and when the face materializes, we see the disfigured face of John Merrick. But then when we cut out of the dream, it's Treves. Treves scene. And that's the scene that leads into his reflection scene. Am I a good man or am I a bad man? So I guess, you know, that it's saying to us, you know, look at yourself. Is there something monstrous inside us all?
That's right. Looking at your own reflection. That's right. Yeah. Good point. That's a really good one. I like that. Yeah. If there isn't anything else, Jen, I think we've covered it. Really, we covered an awful lot.
Yeah.
This has been good. Really good. Yeah. You enjoyed it?
Oh, always. I always enjoy talking to you, Frank. Always, yeah.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, because we certainly did. I know that. But
you need a box of tissues if you haven't seen it.
Oh yes.
You need to have a box of tissues.
Very important. Very important that, because there won't be a dry eye in the house, I promise you. And Jen, you watched it twice, didn't you? Back to back. Didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, just
that took some doing for the emotional ringer going.
Well, it's and I've just come from this week. I was in London seeing Phantom again, so I've
lots of emotional around.
Exposed to these. To these stories with the work of Chris Tucker.
Yes,
has been big in my life the last few days.
Nice connections there.
Yeah.
And of course the Ghoul. Remember that's the other connection.
Yes. So your recommendations: The Elephant Man, Phantom of the Opera, and the Ghoul.
I'm not sure if we're going to be doing a Ghoul podcast tonight yet, but that remains to be seen. But you never know. But
we could have an hour-long discussion on why is he green.
Yeah, that alone could fill a lot. Yeah, as you say, could fill a lot of time because we never really did get the answer, did we?
Oh no, he was just green. I don't understand. What's he green? Every time I watch it, I text you. Why is he green?
Watch it on 4K and you can see more green on it. Yeah. Special high def. Yeah. So I think that's it, really, Jen.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome indeed. And hopefully we'll be back with another one, something else, if you're up for it. Yeah. We'll think of another movie. There's loads of movies, of course, you know, that we both like. So we'll no doubt wheel them out for you in the near future. So until then, guys, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.